Yo, 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 welcome to another episode of You Ask, We Answers. It's I, Michelle, here with you guys for another installment of an amazing show with our amazing team here at Women Engage. We know a lot has been happening over the last month if you guys have been keeping up with what's been going on. And so we're here to put you on to some things that have been going on in our world and what's going on with our communities and what we're doing going forward. And so, of course, I'm joined today by the amazing Sierra. Ah, she's on the stage now. Everybody give a warm welcome. Oh my goodness. Hey Sierra, how's it going? You feeling good?
Yes, I'm feeling good. I had to turn my mic off on. I was talking to nobody.
Look,
But yeah, super excited.
it's all good. I totally understand. And then, of course, we're also joined by JP. Welcome, JP, to the stage. Maybe if I press the button right, there we go.
Hello.
Hey, JP, how are we doing today?
Wonderful. Wonderful.
That's
Good to
good. That's good. And for everybody who's tuning in, Tony unfortunately can't make it today. And of course, we send our regards to our other amazing team members, Andre, our operations associate, and Malika, our CEO and co-founder, who's on a much well-deserved sabbatical.
Mhm.
And so, for my folks who are new to this, just know that Women Engage is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're here to share things for educational purposes, and sometimes we might share things from an individual perspective, but it does not speak on behalf of the organization. Women Engage does not endorse or disparage people from particular parties or candidates. All we're here to do is talk about the facts and talk about elected officials in their capacity, the government in their official capacity, and what we're doing in community to build political power. If you ever have questions about what we got going on, you can always contact us at info@womenengage.org to submit your questions. You can also DM to us on Instagram, Facebook, wherever that may be. We're always here to make sure that we have this type of information for you all today. And so, yes, that's my quick rundown, my spiel. And so, super excited to kind of have this like roundtable talk as we continue to talk about all the things that have happened. If you don't know, now you know there was a primary election last earlier this month. I almost said last month. I'm operating as if though we're already in June, but like a couple weeks ago. And then on
Yep.
top of that, we were dealing with a lot of stuff coming to Supreme Court.
Mhm.
But in that work, the weed team between JP and Sierra holding it down in our programs has been really engaging in community around what's going on around that. And then we also have some really fun things coming up in the month of June. And so, whew, I know I just said a lot real fast. And so, if folks are also tuning in, just know you can always drop your comments and stuff in the chat. We can bring it up screen, kind of like what it says right here at the bottom. And we want to make sure we pull you into the show. This is a live viewing, a podcast type of sort. So we always want to make sure that we're a part of the conversation, building up this type of space. Same thing for my folks on Instagram. So here we are. Oh my gosh. Where do you guys want to start? I'm thinking we could maybe just talk a little bit about the election. Let's just start.
Mhm.
Um, Sierra's been leading an amazing team. JP's been working with some amazing volunteers as we've been trying to get these people to pledge to vote, talking
Yeah.
about what was at stake. And so I want to turn it over to you guys to maybe talk a little bit about like some of the stories or the highlights of what was going on the ground that was leading up to the election. Oh no, I think Sierra might be frozen. Are you still there with me, JP?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Evelyn. Okay. Yes. It was. I would say that going out, I wasn't out in the field with Sierra, but just talking to people who was uh, try to get people to volunteer to come out and just having those conversations with communities and talking to them about what they would like to see uh, 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 in community, what issues that they are currently facing. And we hear the same thing. And that conversation always stems about affordability, definitely, and that how prices are getting higher. They can't really afford to uh, actually they just can't afford to work. It seemed like it because how gas is high, so you have to pay for your gas, you have to pay for your rent and mortgage, you have to pay for child care. So what was the consensus was like, why do I have to vote, or why vote, because no one really don't care. So they have pressing issues, and those pressing issues that's inundated every day. So they feel that those people who are running for office are not talking about, or they are talking about it, but it's not an urgency where they are making that necessary change for them, so they can their lives could be uh, their life is not being impacted enough where those politicians or those who are in office is not really seeing the brunt of what they are experiencing. So regardless of what they are feeling or saying, they still want to have their voice to be heard, and they made plans to go out to the polls and vote.
All right, thank you for that, JP and Sierra. We're glad we're navigating the technology as we can. So glad to
Yeah,
see that you're back with us. And see
sorry
if you want
about
to share
that.
some of the highlights, maybe with the team or things that y'all have been hearing while y'all were on the ground.
Absolutely. So with the team, when it comes to like just being on the ground and dealing with what is happening, almost in alignment with what I did hear from JP about just like what it means to deal with the world where affordability is like
Yeah,
becoming further and furtherly accessible, but like for us being able to come together and just be in community has been one of the like strongest support systems. Like a lot of our canvassers are saying like, if I didn't, not just because of being paid for doing this work, but if I didn't have this community, I wouldn't have a space to express or process what it is um, that I'm dealing with. And it truly has become like the political home that we need in this moment. And also like on the ground when we're having conversations with people, it's the same thing. A lot of people are just frustrated with having to get up and go to work and not really see or be able to feel like the work that they're putting in, because it has to go to bills, it has to go to rent, it has to go to gas. Like gas is
We may have lost Sierra, but that's okay. We're back. Okay, Sierra's back.
mhm.
Okay,
dang
no
it.
worries. I was like, oh no.
I don't know what's
What you saying
happening. I'm
about gas
so
is high?
yes, gas is high, food is high, and it's like a lot going on in this world. And sometimes we want to disassociate, knowing that we can't, because like we still got to
Yeah.
wake up and
Hmm.
do the work anyway. But having community has been what's grounding us together. And then going out and talking to people about what we do, people's eyes have literally like lit up and be like, "Oh my gosh! Like I'm so glad that young people
Yeah.
out there are still working to make change or still going." Like our shirts, we were wearing the "We Vote, We Rise" shirts, but we were trying to
Yes.
invite people to the Justice Jam that's happening on June 6th, and people were like, "Oh my goodness, I'm so glad to see people still doing this work." Like
Yeah.
even people, well, I don't know about y'all, but when I'm canvassing, I'd be like, okay, is this person going to talk to me or not? No, okay, so I'm probably just gonna slide by. They'll literally stop us. People have stopped us to ask us questions and have conversations, or
Mm.
express how they're feeling about what's going on in society, and being able to give them also the outlet to speak about how they feel has been a really amazing journey over the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, or specifically, I'll say this weekend. We just had some really great conversations, and y'all will be able to see that when we put that out on our social media page at woman_engaged. So,
Okay, we love a plug.
yeah,
Okay,
if you caught
we love
everything, I
a
hope that you did.
Okay, yes. If people haven't heard it, you make sure you to follow us
Yes.
on all of the things. We put that down there. IG, okay, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. Okay. We do have a Twitter page, but we don't be on it as often because, as we know, it's Twitter. Well, and
Yeah.
clearly, if my act of resistance is calling it Twitter. So like, um, but no, I think that's
Yeah,
super because I
sad
think that
times.
like especially primary elections typically have such a lower turnout. I feel like Georgia's always interesting to me because every primary we're always breaking records in terms of like larger turnout, but the turnout's still relatively small.
Yeah.
And so it's really heartwarming to know that
Yeah,
more people are having conversations with us and with the team about this, because we do need to increase the uptake of people in the primary elections, because of course the governor's race was on top, but like there was a lot of court races that were on there. And
Mm.
I mean, as I was talking to the team earlier, I looked it up like just to see the margin. And one of the Supreme Court races, the margin was so small, maybe like I think about 25,000 to 40,000 vote difference, if I remember correctly from what I saw. And that's so small compared to like the number of people who can vote
Mhm.
here. And that
Yeah.
was such an important election. I think folks didn't know that even though it's a primary election, which of course we have like those two parties, um, the nonpartisan ballot for the judgeship, those races were one and done, meaning that like who won there, there's no one else running again in the fall for that. This is just
Yeah.
what it is. And
Mhm.
so I think that that's something sometimes too that like
Mhm.
when I think about it in hindsight, it's really trying to bring that into frame for folks, especially in the context of like what just went down with the Supreme Court in Louisiana and how it's kicking
Mhm.
here to Georgia and so
Yeah.
many other states. Because we're fortunate that like our state didn't stop our primary like they did in Louisiana to hurry up and quickly redraw the maps. And for a while there,
Mhm.
we thought that like they weren't going to do it now and maybe try to do it in the fall. But then Governor Kemp gonna say, "Oh no, we need to have a special session June 17th."
Mhm.
And I said I was gonna say this on here, and I wanted to say I got this little tin foil hat theory about how this is an intentional step. Because one thing is to know, and I don't negate this, and I have to name it now. Earlier this year in the legislative session, there was a bill that was passed to get rid of the QR codes on our ballots with no
Mhm.
measure of how to fund it at the county level to help support it. So that was something that was important that needed to be talked about. However, it does not, escape me in the idea that like in Georgia, especially in Atlanta, we're going to have the World Cup starting
Mhm.
here, June 15th for the next month. And 2 days after it starts, we are going to have special session starting that deals with them redrawing our maps downtown in the epicenter of everything. So when we talk about like mobilizing people and getting people out to the Capitol and talking to their legislators about this stuff, I do think some of that was intentionally done to drown out the abilities for people to be able to access their legislators, to access their voice and stuff like that. And so I don't know, it just really grinds my gears, but I just feel like it's something that needs to be named because I have not heard anyone else say it in that way, and how like it was placed that way, because it's like, oh, let's try to escape this under the umbrella of the World Cup. And I don't know, I just needed to say that two piece, but I wanted to get y'all's thoughts too about redistricting, what you guys are hearing. I know we're in a lot of spaces, but
Yeah.
how that ties into the work that we're doing around getting out the vote.
Mhm. Well, some people did not know exactly what that actually means, because even though in our space, in our world, we hear this, we do this line of work. So for those who are community in the community, when that actually happened in Louisiana, and there was we just not only us but other organizations started to be very strategic and say, okay, this happened in Louisiana. It did not come to Georgia, but it will come. What are we going to start doing? So we started doing the planning session of it, and some people just didn't know what redistricting actually means. So I think that sometime where these things where government or those who the GOP start to do things, I guess it go on people's head because it just they don't understand what that have to do with them. That's just a conversation in politics. A lot of people try to stay away from politics. Someone said everything is politics. You sure you said that, and
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. So when you break that down, what it actually means and define it, they can say, "Oh, what they doing? What we doing? What? How that going to happen?" And I think one thing about it is that sometimes we have that language and we know the language. We have to be mindful of messaging and how we are related to people, and how that could be how it could affect their lives and their livelihood. then I think they would be better to have these conversations and then get more involved. It's just my personal opinion
Yeah,
about it. Yeah.
that makes
So
sense. No, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, so just what you were saying about, I didn't put any thought to it about how this. I knew that the special session was going to be called, but it was just happened to be right after the World Soccer game, and I guess when people so caught up into entertainment and want to get down, I think that it tried to take deflate them, whereas that's just too much. Just try to take away that attention. But that's the work that we do. The whole purpose of, even though they got a plan, we got a better plan. It's just like playing chess, but we know their move and they probably don't know. I think they know our move, but just being on the ground and just having those conversations, continue to have those conversations, and like you said, meet people where they are. Just say, hey, uh, uh, get with people, get with organization that you can trust. If you don't know organization, talk to people who do know it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I appreciate that. I think to your point around redistricting and stuff, I think it's good for us just to go ahead and break down like what the decision meant at the Supreme Court
Yeah.
and what happened. So like I want to connect this to like the what had already happened with the Shelby v. Holder case in
Yeah.
2013. So if folks are not familiar with this, back in 2013, they gutted the Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which is what allowed a wave of different policies such as voter ID laws and other things to happen in the state, because it was kind of like the pre-clearance where oftentimes states would, if they had new regulations, would have to petition the federal government and they would have to review it and then approve these types of changes. Whereas now states are now empowered to kind of just do what they want to do, and it doesn't become an issue until it's challenged. So that was the first part of like this undertaking. We have seen the effects of that overall since then. But now, fast forward to 2026, this gutted the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which was essentially like flipping the level of intent. So before, let's say like they were, deciding to read, when we say redistricting, we're talking about like redrawing the maps.
That's
so
right.
This all impacts different types of elections. It can't impact the presidential one, but it oftentimes impacts a lot of your state representation. Mostly. So like it's more so of a local impact, or even how you see things happening in like your municipalities and stuff. So it's really important to know what that looks like. So they might decide like every 10 years, it usually happens with the census based off of how the population is distributed. They'll decide to redraw the maps to better accurately represent the people. Sometimes what will happen though is they'll say, oh, we're doing this because of the economics of the area. But with Section 2, as it was before, if someone found out, like, oh, this actually disproportionately harms people of color or Black voters, like some type of protected class, then they would have to like reject those maps and try again, right? It kind of like put the burden on them, the people who are making the maps, to do so willingly. Well, now what we have to do with the new judgment that came out is that we have to prove intent. So even though it may cause harm, that doesn't mean that they have to now redraw the maps to make them fair. It's more so like we have to prove that they initially drew the maps intentionally to disproportionately harm Black voters. And that's because at the time when the case in Louisiana, they had created new districts that were going to help increase representation for voters of color and Black voters in Louisiana, because they have a very disproportionate legislative body when it comes to representing the people who are, they're part of their constituency or their populace. So that's kind of where we are now. And that's why everyone's kind of up in arms, because what happens then is that like we now have all these states that are rushing to redraw these areas in the middle of a 10-year cycle. Because again, this usually happens every 10 years after the census.
At the census, yeah.
And now it's like, okay, now we have to also prove that they're intentionally doing it to harm Black voters. And they're going to, of course, say no, because like there's very few people who I feel like do racist things who are like, I am, yes, in fact, are racist. Like there's very few people who do that. Like, so the fact that like they're moving the threshold and putting the burden on folks to be able to do that. And so that's kind of what is happening. So I just wanted to clear that up for folks who are tuning in, who are confused, because I think JP, you raised a really good point, is that like there's a lot of language that's really inaccessible, because I mean, I'm a political scientist academically. I don't think redistricting was a topic of conversation in high school, middle school, or like any type of social studies class. I mean, you learned about the census as just like, oh, this is how we would account for everybody, but like no one talks about what redrawing the maps means and how it impacts our vote or even how it ties to the Voting Rights Act. And so I just appreciate you for lifting that up, because even when folks were like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And I'm like, we're still talking to people about your vote mattering. So like, here we are. And so, Sierra, I'm glad you're back with us. To chime in on the convo. I know, between all the stuff happening here in Georgia, the internet is not on our side right now. So I appreciate you for hanging with us, and I appreciate everybody else for hanging with us. But I definitely want you to be able to jump in on this convo, share some thoughts that you have about what's going on.
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't know what's going on with the technology if they don't like what I'm going to say, so I'm going to say it anyway while I can. But to your point about, or taking it back, to your point about special sessioning happening at the same time at the World Cup, like just how like purposefully, like intentionally disruptive that is to movement work. To be able to get to the Capitol, to be able to organize and plan, even when it comes to timing and where you can park, where you can afford to park, where we can afford to show up. It's just very like heinous to do, especially when you were like in that U.S. Governor Kemp, oh, we're not going to do that. We're not going to, don't worry about it. It just feel like for me personally, I live downtown and I asked you, I was like, so what are we doing? Are we going to be going into office during the World Cup? I was trying to avoid everything that's happening with the World Cup, honestly. And so to now know that, like, to have that, I feel like the word is apprehension to even wanting to be outside, already being overwhelmed with the amount of traffic that's going to be here, and recognizing the problems that we already know are going to come from the World Cup. Rising affordability, rising the cost of rent, rising the cost of access to anything that we have access to in this city. It's like building problem upon problem upon problem, and sometimes people don't have the chance and opportunity to really break it down and call it out for what it is. So thank you for even like mentioning that. I think it's very important for us to strategize and organize in a way that is still 2 steps and 3 steps ahead, without being overwhelmed, which in this work is really difficult. And also to your language about like, we didn't learn about redistricting in high school or any civics or social studies classes. Like, that's so true. I feel like I didn't even learn really the term redistricting and what it meant until I got into politics myself, and sat through literally learned it through experience, what redistricting looked like, specifically in the state of Virginia. And shout out to that state for taking care of what they needed to a long time ago. But here in Georgia, this has caused me to like do a deeper dive into how Supreme Court has been used to weaponize our vote. The Voting Rights Act was passed, and it took me to I'm forgetting the name of the case, but it was in North Carolina, about how they gerrymandered the map to try to dilute the Black vote. But that took me, that got me to, before this it wasn't just about diluting the Black vote, it was about diluting Black representation when it comes to state representation. And we don't even see, and this is specifically like right after the Reconstruction era, we don't even see the amount of Black elected officials in office as we did 100 years ago. So to still be so fearful about us having access to power, having access to voting, and knowing that they can't weaponize like they did in Wilmington, North Carolina, by burning a town down to scare away elected officials. They can't do that, so they now are using Supreme Court still to dilute our vote and weaponize our vote, and very intentionally and loudly say that we don't want you to have a part in this so-called system of democracy. It's really been like disheartening personally, as someone who looked up to like the civil rights movement, and the tactics that we were able to use to gain our voice or to fight for our voice in the first place. And to think that that was done and it's not, it's like, okay, what tactics, what do we need to do now to strengthen our power and like level the playing field and what it is that we're fighting? Because a lot of us, I know I'm rambling, I'm sorry, don't have the money that it takes to take something to Supreme Court anyway.
Yeah.
What we're seeing right now are groups of people who have such an insidious like disdain for us being able to participate in this democracy that they are putting everything they have, and it takes a lot of money. Like, it's not like someone just files some paperwork and then it just so happens to end up in the Supreme Court. It's very expensive, it's very strategic, and it's very inaccessible often, for us to do the same, which is why we have organizations like the ACLU, the NAACP, the National Urban League, who are that strong arm. And we as a people need to continue to join these movements, and to put our power together, you need there's a lot of work we got to do. So join us.
That's the altar call. So join us. Oh my God. I feel like with that too being said, right? I have that banner too. I'll say, let me put that banner up. I think, like, to the point that you're making as well about like what are the things that we could do, and it can be very overwhelming because I think it's a lot of information. And I was talking to someone about this last week. I was actually in a meeting about it, and I said, it's not that like everyone has to know everything. You just need to know people who know a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like where we kind of come in here at Women Engaged to kind of assist with that. Because I'll tell people straight up, I know a lot, but I don't know everything. Mm-hmm. But I could try to figure out how to find out or find people who know things deeper. The biggest thing that I can tell people right now is that, like, contact your legislatures. Let them know what kind of maps that you want, and let them know that you're watching. That's like the first step. Over the years, organizations like ours and others, especially like when we were rising up to 2020 for the 2020 census, was really advocating for an independent commission that was be led by like appointed Georgians and citizens and constituents and other experts to help lead redistricting or like redrawing the map efforts. So this commission would be the ones there. That's like another way to ask for our legislators to do that. There's ways that we can, as people, inject ourselves into what the government is doing and still have a voice and say. Commissions, to me, you can have them on every branch of government. I've been a part of commissions both locally and statewide, like in Missouri and Arkansas, and it's a great place for us to really blend together the expertise of what's going on in community and really helping influence policy. And even if it's not there, we have the tools to advocate for ourselves to get that to happen. Like, we're electing these people into office, we can hold them accountable around these things, and also name out the hard efforts of what it takes to be there. Because again, like, that World Cup is coming, and it's going to be here for a month. Like, if folks are not familiar with FIFA, that's the acronym for the World Soccer League. It's a series of games that are taking place all across the country for like over the course of like a month or so. And so there's going to be a host of games that are happening here. That means that we're going to have an influx of people who are coming in, an influx of people on public transportation, and also navigating all these different types of issues, especially just in the height of summertime. I mean, outside the scope of just it being World Cup, like, it's Atlanta, people trying to be outside and have fun. Like, that's just kind of what we're thinking about. So I think about that too, that like when we think about accessibility and what it means to be outside, that there's things that we can still do even if you can't make it to the Capitol, which is that. And so making sure that you stay tuned with us and join in, sign up for our newsletter, things like that. We can keep you updated with that information about when you can sign on, jump in, do things there, and that we can also have a really good time doing it, which is why my shameless plug for our event, June 6th at Greenbrier Mall, which is our Justice Jam. We host Justice Jams at least twice a year. This is the place where we know that we can like have fun and also fight for justice, and it doesn't have to be like mutually exclusive. Like, we can do these things at the same time. And so we have free food, free childcare, music, dancing, games, really dope conversations, really building community, take action on so many things like this and many others. So if you haven't ready, make sure to check that out. I'm going to put a QR code somewhere on the screen at some point. There it is, where you can sign up to get more, to sign up for that event and RSVP. It's going to be a really great time. All that type of stuff. But I just wanted to like sneak that in there as we were talking about this. But no, okay. So enough of the plugs. With the redistricting conversation or the redrawing of maps, right? I think what's really fun and engaging on my end is that like when we start thinking about like what a new map could look like or why maps are even important to begin with. I think sometimes like that's where it's also a little bit lost. I can't tell y'all how many times I have engaged folks about voting and everybody thinks it's a very straightforward process. But when I tell y'all elections are probably some of the most complicated, systematic things that happen here because each election is weighed a bit differently. So like even if you vote in an election, your vote in a primary when there's two partisan candidates running versus a nonpartisan race is counted differently. You voting for your county commissioner versus your state rep versus your U.S. senator all happen differently. And this is why that redistricting fight matters because there's different maps that illustrate different things for the impact of that vote. Right. And that's why I was like, because right now we're talking about this on more of a federal and state level. And I want to mention too that like the redrawing of the maps that are taking place here in Georgia would not take effect until 2028. So they won't impact the elections this year or your elections in 2027, but will impact the election of 2028. So it's just really important to like kind of like note these things, right? That these are things that are going on in the backdrop of what's happening in the fuller scope of it. And there's a lot more to it. It's not to say that you need to know all the things. It's just to be cognizant that you know that there's more. Okay. Like, so when we're saying this, it's not like now we have to get down to the specifics of like this, that, and the other. Like, trust me, we can. Yeah. And we can do a training on that at another time. Right. But I think sometimes like in movement work, especially with like the way social media has been over the last few years, I feel like how we hyper individualize activism and advocacy is detrimental. And this is really a community school project effort. We just have to do our part and just trust that other people are doing their parts, even if we don't know exactly what all the parts are.
Wow.
That makes sense.
It does. It does. I'm interested specifically like when you're talking about your vote is counted differently for different elections. I feel like I understand that, but I don't. Or like I couldn't explain it to somebody else. What you mean by that? I would kind of love to hear that a little bit more or just go into that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to think about how to break this down real. Perfect example is the presidency. It's like, because everybody talks about it, that and the electoral college and like what's going on here and things of that nature, right? But it's like there's different voting precincts, different counties that when you vote based off of the proportion of votes in that area takes that vote.
Yes.
That's why we end up in situations where people are being elected in that seat in particular who may have gotten the popular vote but did not actually win the vote.
Yes.
And that's because of what it looks like. Because some areas, like if they vote a certain way, no matter what other people are voting, that's the way it's going, right? And then there's other areas that might be a little bit closer on the margins or what they call purple areas if you're in the partisan races, all the other type of stuff. And so that's where things get a little bit different. So your vote is counted slightly differently because it's not a straightforward democracy. I think something that we talk about a lot in the field is that like we're not a democracy, we're a representative democracy, and there's nuance and difference in that. And I think that's where people get discouraged a lot because in a straightforward democracy, a vote is a vote that counts. You count the general majority vote, and that's what gets it, and that's a very basic form of it. But the way this country was constructed was doing that in a way to make sure that like minority votes, and I mean minority in terms of like number, was not being outcasted. Because think about it this way, like most people stay in an urban area, even suburbs, right? So if we actually did majority of stuff, it would actually hurt rural populations and their ability to be advocated for and represented, especially those who are in agriculture. Like that's something that they thought about way back then. And that's where we started getting things like the Electoral College and all these weird numbers for like how you calculate the House of Representatives in the US, like the Senate. That's why it starts to get really complicated because despite the many shortcomings of the people who created this country, okay, because they didn't want none of us around, okay, like they were thinking about that aspect that like if we did a true like majority rules, you could end up with a lot of issues because of the ways in which we as humans organize ourselves. That's what I mean by like our votes count a little bit differently depending on the race of the vote because of the breakdown of it. That's why like even for our states, like your US rep, like House map will look different than like your state rep map. And like who's voting towards that. Or like that's why sometimes you can stay in the same city as someone, but your ballots will look different based off of where you're located in that city. And so that's why I say it gets very interesting, and it's things that you wouldn't know about until you like directly are impacted by it. Like I know for myself, being in Atlanta or like the Atlanta area for most of the time, I have spent a lot of times living in areas that were unincorporated, which means I don't get to vote in city politics despite having that city as an address. Right. So like it's like those type of things, but you don't know it until you have that lived experience because things are they just can't be generalized. I think that's the thing is that like, you know, the human condition is that we try to fit things into a box and generalize things, but like there's 7 billion people on this planet, y'all.
Yeah.
That's 7 billion different perspectives, 7 billion different realities in terms of like how we're seeing things. And so I think that's where it is. And that's why I was like, I could ramble about it all day. And I wish I could make it more approachable. And that's why I say like, because sometimes when you start getting into it, if you pull something out of it, out of context, I understand where people can get it and think some type of way about the Electoral College. I get it. Because if you only pull out that one part and then you only look at it from the lens of like what has happened in the last 10 years, then yeah, I see where you're coming from. And that's not necessarily what's happening, right? Like it's not like, oh, the Electoral College is a secret Illuminati society or something. Because that's not what's happening. Okay. It's just that like unfortunately this is how the functions are going because there are other people, other strategists who understand the nuances of those maps, who understand where those votes need to be curated and developed or suppressed in order to get the wins they do. And then they actively campaign and advocate for it. And they actually bank on the fact that people don't know, are not connected, and are you know dissuaded from actually participating. Like that actually fuels a lot of that agenda for people to get there, because the last 10 years we didn't get here overnight. It came through certain efforts of misinformation and also like maybe for what is it, an abundance of faith in a system that doesn't exist, like that whole concept of like the man, right? Or like, oh, they would never let that happen. I'm like, who is they? You know, you turn on the light, you realize it's just us in the room. So
That's big. I love that. I'm interested. Thank you for breaking it down. Like I get it now. I'm really interested because at least on my ballot, I had 41 decisions to make in the primary election. And it took a lot of time to really to like make my decision and study who I was voting for, why I was voting for those. What was the process like for you? Did it feel overwhelming to you to have so many different options? And like when you went to the polls, like what made you confident in your vote?
I'm gonna let JP answer first.
Well, when I voted, I don't remember how many questions I was out there. It was pretty much straightforward, you know. I think I should have done my due diligence. I know how you are, Sierra, like to read up about who are the representation. Some of the people who I've noticed that was running, and two things. I was looking at them like, shameless isn't a plug, but I was looking at one particular individual. I said, "Oh, I think this person sounds good," because during their little spill, some of them when they come out there, or just reading about their little bio, they sound like they'd be a great fit. However, I don't think they really understand what they getting into. I think that sometimes when you have people who has some type of not ex, I wouldn't say experience, but I think I can say experience. Those people who may come from a different world, come from for example, one person is a dentist, and they say what changes they will make becoming if they are elected, and it sounds good, they look good, but I was kind of leery of understanding. Well, do you are you doing this because you want to see change? Are you going to fight for us, or are you doing this because you think that is something else you could add on to your list of accomplishments?
Mhm.
And going back to Michelle, what you were saying about democracy, I kind of remembered having this conversation with my dad back when, and I agree with that because, like, I can understand why people say they vote don't really matter because it's you think you voting for someone particularly, and you think they would uh, 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 they run on exactly what they say they're going to do and don't do it. So it sounds to me like those we always going to be left out. Those voters going to be left out because you entrust that what those politicians are saying or the representation or representative are saying that they really are for you. But things change when they get in there. So you look at it, who really have that power. So going back to that question, Sierra, it wasn't that deep. I just looked at it. That's okay, JP. What do you know about that person? Would that person would make a this is the nonpartisan side about it, because like you say, it's one vote and you done. And I just had to think about what I would say is this here. Just do your work, just do your research, and make a decision based upon what your values are versus the popularity that's out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, JP.
Yes.
I think when I think about your questions here, I'm just like, I mean, this is my bread and butter. That's how I feel about it. It's like right, so it's like I feel like I got like a little bit of like a edge about it, but I think for me, it's always a little bit overwhelming when a ballot's more than a page.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, I think that's just life in general. When anything's more than a page, like I'm overwhelmed. Okay, like so, I'll name that. I think though, for me in the primary elections, I actually enjoy them because half of the questions are those survey questions
Mhm.
Yeah.
that form the party's agenda that's coming up, and so I like
Mhm.
to look at it as insight about what they're looking to possibly running with, or what
Mhm.
they see down the line in terms of like where their values are, which of course is very different than like where the policies may land. Because
Yeah.
I think like exactly to your point, JP, around like, folks may feel like there's a switch up. I think I may have said it here. I said it somewhere. I don't know anymore.
Mhm.
I say it a lot, but I'm like, these folks, they're people, and I can only imagine the weight of what it means to be elected and represent 100, if not thousands of people or millions of people, and then have to enter a room to negotiate with other people
Yeah.
around like advocating for what's going on, right? And knowing that that's again why the process moves so slowly. That's why, in particular, like our federal government has been. It's still. I think we're still navigating the shutdown. If I remember correctly, which is wild to say because it's been so long.
Mhm.
As we continue to like make these concessions to make sure people are getting paid and stuff like that, because people are having to do this right now, right? And so it's just been so much happening around
Mhm.
that, and I feel like when it comes to voting and like dealing with the overwhelming feeling of all the things
Mhm.
that like we can't control necessarily all the outcomes of what's going on, but what we can do is make sure we vote again with our values in mind, but also too
Mhm.
like where the opportunities are, right? Because there's no such thing as a perfect candidate, and I think that sometimes we do ourselves a disservice of thinking that there is, or thinking that just because someone's a likable candidate or a
Mhm.
personable candidate, that means that they're the best candidate.
That's right.
Because those are two different things for me. Like, I mean, we could all have the same interests, but it's like, can I talk to you? Can I like,
Mhm.
can I advocate to you? Do I see like the most benefit of being able to sway your opinion on my experience versus you actually having lived it or understanding it or doing all these things,
Yeah.
or even like using the sound bites to like virtue signal at people like that, because I think those are very different things. Because I mean, there's so many likable people who run, right? I mean, there's like that cult of personality, the charisma, like raising people up around like what's going on. The whole like back in the day, it used to be like shaking hands and kissing babies. That was the phrase. Nowadays, it's about memes and TikToks and dance. Okay, I'm just saying like it's the same MO, just different medium. In terms of like how to get people on their side or whatnot, and I think that, you know, again, it's cool to have fun. It's cool to have fun politicians, but then it's like, what are we doing? Because that's why I'm really a fan of Madami in New York. Because don't get me wrong, he's a fellow millennial like me, so he's a little bit cringe, but he always quotes like different cartoon characters and stuff. And I'm like, that guy's cool. But what really makes him cool is like, this dude's been about action since day one.
He was.
And like, it's really doing things and like standing on business too, as he's doing that type of stuff. And I feel like that's such a great example of striking that balance between like the personality and the personability of a politician versus like the actionable steps that they're going to do and take. And I think that like looking at his tenure right now is really exciting to look at, because it shows about the possibilities of what can happen in local politics, just in your city. And we're not even talking about like your county and your state level yet, right? Because I think a lot of air is spent on the federal level for good reason, as we all know, because gas is like $5 in downtown Atlanta. So like, but outside of that, it's like there are certain caveats and things that we could do to buffer some of the harms that are being done at the federal level through our local politics. So I don't know. I think, yeah, when I look at the ballot, I was like, it's always a little bit overwhelming, which is why I always say, if you can't look at your My Voter page ahead of time, you could print out your ballot ahead of time. And you can take it in there with you. You can't take your phone. So just know that now. Like, you might pull it up on your phone, be like, oh, I got it on my phone. You can't take your phone into the ballot box. But go ahead and print out that sample ballot, or if not, just write it down on a piece of paper. However you want to do it, that's fine. But that is also really helpful as well. Because I did my sample ballot at home. I didn't necessarily need to like print it off for myself at the time. I wanted to, and I honestly forgot. I sat in my car beforehand, and I like just sketched some things down just so I remembered it. But then when I went in, I felt fine. So that's kind of like how I navigate being overwhelmed with that type of stuff. But I know in the fall there probably will be a lot more on your ballots, just so y'all know. Because sometimes we're like different ballot measures. Some of the tax code stuff comes in, stuff like that. And so getting connected with organizations like ours and others who are in like this type of work is really important, because we'll come out with explainers or things to help break down some of the language around it. Because sometimes it uses a lot of like legal language that like even goes above my head. Like my eyes just kind of glaze over, and I'm just like, I don't know what, this is beyond my expertise of understanding. So I think that that's always a good way to tackle it too, because it can be a lot, and it's like so many options, and it's like, you know, I think about it like I'm always just like, okay, so how does it impact me though? What is this happening, right? And so we'll have some more time to explore that too as like the summer goes on, just like talking to community about it, and really connecting those dots. Let's see here. I'm trying to think of what else there was about it. So I guess let's talk about the aftermath of the election. I know, right? I was like, Sierra's like, yeah, we've been waiting for this. Okay. Because as we know, I think on the Democratic side, Keisha Lance Bottoms came out on top with that. And then the inside of things is going into a runoff, if I remember correctly, between like R and somebody else for the governor race. And so that runoff election, I believe, is June
16th.
16th. I was at 13th. Don't quote me on that. I'm sorry, you guys. I should know this ahead of time. And there's other positions too down the ballot, but that's the top of the ticket that I do remember.
Yes.
But I'll turn it over to you, Sierra, if you want to talk a little bit more about the aftermath of the election.
For sure. So yeah, I wrote it all down. So of course, on the Democratic side, and these are only like, I don't even want to frame it as top of the ticket. So, because then it makes other things seem not important. So I apologize in advance. But on the Democratic ballot, there's going to be a runoff election for lieutenant governor. there is going to be a runoff election for the Secretary of State. Oh, I'm going to tell you all the percentage margins because I think that matters. It's so for the lieutenant governor, it was 41% to 39%. Like that's how close the margin was. For Secretary of State, there's going to be a runoff election, 35.22% versus 42.34%. I'm leaving out names on purpose, but you can find this information at the Secretary of State website. The Commissioner of Insurance, also a runoff election on the Democratic ballot, and then the Commissioner of Labor, there will be a runoff election. On the Republican ballot, the U.S. Senate representative, I believe for seat 1, there's going to be a runoff election for that. The Republican governors have a runoff election, lieutenant governor, and also Secretary of State. So we've got to get back out there again. And if I'm not mistaken, I was like, okay, wait, this is June 16th. And then World Cup is starting on what day?
The 15th.
The 15th.
Oh, see? Okay. So the 15th is World Cup, runoff elections on the 16th. And then the 19th is special session?
17th.
The 17th. The 17th.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
I know. It's all back to back. And I think that's why it's important to early vote if you can.
Yeah.
If you like, because I know it's a lot of information too. If you want to get like direct information about what is on the ballots available to you, check out the website that's on the screen, mvp.sos.ga.gov. That's the My Voter page for the state through the Secretary of State's office. You can see the exact ballot that's located for your exact area and what's there and available for you. It'll break it down across the ballots, and it will operate the same as a primary election. So you can choose between a Democratic ballot, the Republican ballot, or a nonpartisan ballot if there are races available. So you'll see that directly for your area, because and folks who don't know and people who do already know, I'm going to say again, we have 159 counties here in Georgia. Okay? There's 159 different ways that you could vote. And then within those counties, there's different municipalities, right? Different cities. So I want to name that, like, we're giving this general information. Don't take it as like, well, Women Engaged said that this is what's supposed to be here. So nope. We're giving you a general sense of information. Yes. But the biggest takeaway is that you need to check out that website right there, or if you're on Instagram, right there, and check it out for yourself to know what you have and it's there. We want to make sure you have those resources. We're just talking it out with you about some of the general things that are happening. But for that runoff election, it is important because runoff elections already have like a much lower turnout in general. They usually compare to primary turnouts. They get extra low for primary runoffs. So if you can early vote, I believe early voting starts next week. And so make sure to check that out. That information will also be below as well. You can see those precincts. And the great thing about early voting is that you can vote anywhere in your county. So you're not only stuck to just your polling location. You can vote anywhere in your county, do it before work, after work, during your lunch break. It's a very in and out situation. I know I early voted. It's really fun. Took like 2-3 minutes, especially because I came prepared because I looked at my sample ballot. So check out the mvp.sos.ga.gov for more details today.
It's a lifesaver there. Yeah, I definitely went in with my sample ballot filled in and ready to go. So I'll do it again.
Yes, and so I know right now, like a lot of folks are feeling some anxiety with Keisha Lance Bottoms coming out of the primary because of the experiences of Brian Kemp versus Stacey Abrams 2 rounds, like 2018 and 2022. I think it's important now, and again, this is for educational purposes, right? So I'm not telling anyone to vote for or against any political party or candidate at this time, but I'm saying that like to uplift that shared trauma of how people feel when it comes to Black women running for a leadership position, and if Georgia is ready for a Black woman in that position. And I think there's a lot of anxiety around it. And I think the best thing to encourage people with, and you guys can also give your opinions too around this, it's like, check, as y'all said before, check in on your candidates, look at the sites to see what they're offering, and vote with your values or the work in mind about who you feel best represents what you find important versus feeling discouraged because of the past events, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I really am interested, like not for like a doubt, and I'll say that right now. There was no doubt in my mind that Actually, I'm going to rephrase this and say it correctly. I didn't predict the outcome of the primary election specifically for the Democratic governor at all. But what is interesting to me is now that this has happened in 2018, it's happened in 2022, it's happening now where a Black woman is coming out on the top of a ticket for the primary elections to become the governor of Georgia. What tips, because what advice do you have, Michelle, specifically, in like mobilization that could see us get a Democratic governor across the finish line? Specifically being that it's a Black woman, because there's so much like identity politics wrapped in like the first thing I think of or am ingrained to think is a Black woman going to be able to beat a white man. Like that's going to be what the race is. Like, and so the people who are coming out to the primaries believe that this is possible. But when we get to the actual election day, whether it be it voter suppression or just, I don't know, a mix of opinion, I don't know. How do you
I
think
hear
we
what
can?
you're saying.
Yeah.
Um, so I had to take a step back and
Mm-hmm.
do this in a very nonpartisan way, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's like I feel like the advice that I have isn't necessarily about like seeing one thing over like seeing one person to win versus another, more so than it is coping with the anxiety that of the moment brings. And I say that too because like even we experience it here at Women Engage, and we experience it every time that like Black women are in leadership. Even though we're a 501c3 organization, a lot of folks will think, oh, Women Engage, you guys are clearly campaigning for XYZ person,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not the case, or people look at us differently or make assumptions based off of that about our politics, what we're doing, and things of that nature, and it becomes difficult. I also hold space too for folks who are like maybe inspired by the moment but are feeling reluctant about participating because of what they think might be possible. And I can't remember the movie, but it's some Black movie out there, and I'm trying to remember it, but it's basically like, just run your race, do your walk, do your thing, right? And don't worry about what other people are doing. And I know that sounds crazy, right? Because like our whole jam is about worrying about what other people are doing. But what I mean by that is that like as a singular voter, like as a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one else is in that ballot box but you.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And you're not in anyone else's ballot box. So who you vote for and how that voting happens is your business and your business alone.
Yeah.
All you can do right now is have the conversations that you need to have with the people who are in your community. Meaning like I think, back in the day, oh, you're not supposed to talk about money, politics, or religion with people. No, you need to talk about all that, actually. Okay? Like, you need to talk about all that because we like to assume that just because the people around us are, we're in community with them, we like them, they're really cool, we see eye to eye on like different things, like maybe pop culture, sports, music, whatever, means that we're aligned politically. And that's not always the case because we're
Yeah.
not only having conversations or talking about what we shared and stuff like that. And so I feel like it's like, depending on wherever you are in terms of voting, if you want more people to be aligned with what you're in, you have to be comfortable talking about it and not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily looking at just the think pieces to talk about it,
Yeah.
the social media heads to talk about it. And I say that too because I think sometimes, like, don't get me wrong, I believe, parasocial relationships are real. I also believe in the power of influence, and that's real too. But you also, too, as an individual, have your own sphere of influence. There are
Mhm.
people in your life, and I don't like. I name this for anyone who's listening, like not just you, Sierra, but I'm like this is like I'm saying this to answer the question, but also the audience at hand. Like there are people in your life who value your opinion,
Mm-hmm.
value your perspective, who value your experiences, and will listen to you. And even if in the moment they disagree, you just never know how far your voice reaches with people until later on. And I
Yeah.
think I've had those type of moments before in the past. So that's why I said like dealing with the anxiety of this moment, because I get it. It's like, oh, here we go, especially given the past political experiences of Keisha Lance Bottoms as mayor of Atlanta, because there was critique about that too, and also because she was a one-term mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there's a lot of contextual things there as well about her experience. I mean, she came in this, and then the next year was Stacey Abrams versus Kemp, and we had all those issues with voting that year where like our election system almost collapsed. Like And then we had like the abortion ban happen, and then it was COVID, you know? And I know for her, she had personally had a lot of things going on, stuff like that. So there's like some context of like the reality of what's going on and like really understand the humanity of people in that. I think right now we still have enough time. It's only May between that now and November to really start interrogating some of these things and really sitting down with what those type of conversations are. But I think it's always important to name that beyond the governorship, what's at stake for us in November and why it's important to know things. Because I keep talking about it, but we need a buffer.
Mm-hmm.
The federal government is all one right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we need people who are elected into office who are going to help protect us, who are really going to address the issues around affordability, because I'm actually very scared about that, issues around transportation, the environmental issues, because like
No.
Georgia's been in a drought for forever, and now we're into 2 weeks of just constant rain, right? And like, what does it mean to say, like Florida, and not Florida, Lord, and Georgia flooded in like less than like what 30 minutes last week, and people were stranded on the interstate. Like, you know, there's these different type of things that are happening that it's like, yes, there's a lot of things happening in the historic moment of the idea that like someone who shares like our identity can be in there, like in terms of Black woman governor. But
Yeah.
it's like in the reality of it, it's like making sure that we sit down with this and knowing that like all across up and down that ballot, we need people in positions who are really here for the people and
Yes.
not necessarily to serve just like some partisan agenda that is deeply rooted in only helping a very small minority of people. And what I mean by very small minority of people, I mean explicitly rich people,
Mm.
rich business owners and people who have invested interest in all of these things that are going on. So I think that, so that's how I want to answer that, because that's like the best way I can do it, a nonpartisan thing. Catch me off the clock. Space, I'm not, you know, we're actively repping Women Engaged for like a different nuance or take on that. I just wanted to like kind of stretch that question out a little bit, because I don't want to, you know, give people the wrong impression around like the line here for us as a C3 organization.
Yeah.
But that is my general sense of like how we navigate that, and how we mobilize people. It's like, let's talk about, you know, like let's literally talk about like those experiences, right? And what it means. I think one thing I want to add though that always gets me, and it might be a conversation that we have down the line, I would love, maybe we get a guest on this about this, is the rural perspective. Because I feel like that was something that I kept hearing about with Stacey Abrams versus Kemp. And I was curious about it now. And I say that just because when Stacey Abrams was running, she had a lot of backing from national entities. And that might situate fine with like Atlanteans who, you know, it's all this, Atlanta's a city of hype. I always say, sorry, it's a very hype city. You get some hype behind you, don't hype it up. But outside of Atlanta, there's all of Georgia. And I don't believe, and I believe I remember hearing this, that really resonated with people. And we already knew this from a statistic, like a data perspective too, that like people don't necessarily like celebrity in the messaging, which is ironic to say, given that there's a celebrity as the president of the United States. But that's another topic. But I said that people don't like necessarily like the celebrity, and they sometimes will say that that's probably part of the reason why Stacey Abrams didn't win then. So I am curious now about what that looks like now, because I do think she's going to get more celebrity endorsement or celebrity attention given the identity politics, historic meaning of what it could mean if she did win. So there's a thought. That's a thought.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm like listening to your answer. I'm like repeating things in my head, and the thing that's like resonating with me, and I'm so glad you brought it up, was like that we need a buffer because of the state of the country, specifically at a federal level. Like, what is it going to take to protect the state of Georgia for the next, hopefully, what do we have, 2 years left, 3 years left? Hopefully. And then also, I do want to touch, I think it's like we are at such a time and where like the identity politics it's still there, but shifting, and we're recognizing that it's more of a class war that's happening. It is yeah, who has access to affordability, who can say affordability and understand what that means, like, and yeah, before I go on my rant, that's where I'm centering my decisions.
Yeah.
Honestly, is there's we use a buzzwords affordability and or um, access and equitable transit and all of these things, making sure that everyday people actually have access to these things is my words are escaping me. It right now it feels like a class war, and I think that there's a lot more unity and movement and mobilization that can happen once we kind of push past the identity politics and see what's actually going to serve the people.
Oh my God. I'm so glad you said that. It made me think of, did you guys follow the recent drama with James Charles?
No.
Mm-mm.
Let me tell y'all. See, I'm so excited where I can bridge pop culture into like the politics and everything.
Yes.
So okay, right? Because I was like, that was wild. So as we all know, earlier this month, Spirit Airlines went down, right?
Mhm.
And this is for folks who don't know the tea. So they went bankrupt overnight, left a lot of people without a job. There was a woman who started a GoFundMe, and she was just, sent the link out to some influencers. One of them went to James Charles. By the way, I didn't know who James Charles was until all this happened. I just want to name that. But James Charles is like this white guy, I think maybe Canadian. I don't know where he's from, but he's either from or somewhere around there, and has been on social media since a teenager, has made their livelihood on doing makeup, stuff like that, and makes this ridiculously out of touch video degrading this woman, telling her that like she's lazy and that she could just need to apply for a job, and how dare she ask him for money, and she could have used that time to do this, and like it was so super out of touch, and it was like bonkers. And after he makes that first video, comes back and makes two other videos where like sorry not sorry, and then doubles down on it, makes another one, and it's not until like a number of creators, including Jackie Asmoa, also known as Jackie Ina, comes out and it's like, you could have just not replied, right? Because again, this is a private DM that this woman has sent him, did not have to say anything, but also too naming how out of touch he is about the current job market. Because as we know, a lot of people right now, when it comes to being gainfully employed, it takes sometimes upwards to 18 months.
Yes.
Right? Like it takes upwards to 18 months. Like, and these people literally just lost their jobs overnight. And most people are like one paycheck away from houselessness or food insecurity or whatever. Like, people's realities are just, we know, but James Charles was like super out of touch about it, right? Super. So like finally James has been out and been on the apology tour and like has given money or whatever. But I bring this up because that point that you made about affordability and finding folks and like, do we even know people? Jackie Ina came back with a really great take on this and said that like, even though what James did was deplorable, it doesn't happen in isolation, because what we really have is an issue around empathy. Because the lack of empathy is something that allows people to not be able to see the humanity of people just trying to make means for stuff. Like there are people who are putting in like 80 to 100 job applications a week. Mm-hmm. Me sending a DM to someone about a GoFundMe, like, don't take much.
Yeah.
No. So to say that somebody's lazy and they need to apply for a job and you could just do this, especially for someone who ain't never touched a W-2. Because mind you, they've been a social media influencer since day one. And also was crying about TikTok being like taken off, being banned. It was a whole thing. It was super out of touch about it. But I think in this conversation about affordability and class, I think even at the intersections, what we're really dealing with and grappling with is that through the hyper individualism of things, folks are really lacking the empathy of understanding people's circumstances, even when it's beyond them. Right? Because it's like, I've personally never experienced losing my job due to a sudden bankruptcy.
Right.
But I don't like the empathy of knowing what that means, right? Like, what that like level of like losing your livelihood could mean for you. And I think that when you were talking about that part about it and like what people mean around it, because I think right now affordability was the buzzword last year for the PSC, the Public Service Commission race, is definitely the word this year.
Yeah.
People are running. It's a level of like empathy that we see from our candidates and folks like that, and folks who are running, who can understand the circumstances of folks even beyond their own lived experiences.
Lived experience. That's
Yes.
fair. That's fair. I think, let me slow down. One, specifically on the ground from campaigning, I want to root this in like facts and experience. One thing that people were saying when we were knocking on the doors, letting them know that primary elections were happening, is we didn't know that there was an election, and these politicians have not come into our communities to let us know. You guys have been the first one to let us know. And I think it requires, yes, empathy and a desire to actually understand what is happening across all spectrums. And I'm looking specifically like in Atlanta, affordability. I also drive, like I do Uber deliveries. A lot of us are working other jobs to make sure that we can stretch our means. And there are I want to say two completely different worlds. There seems to be four completely different worlds simply in the city of Atlanta, where you have people living lifestyles who don't know what it's like to be on another spectrum, or uh, to be in a completely different environment where everybody is like working to make ends meet, versus going to Buckhead and like enjoying your life and getting valet parking and paying $300 for a meal and not worrying about things at all, versus the person who's at JJ's probably cash apping their mama, dad, whoever they need to make sure they can pay the $10 to get meals, right? So just like back to class. Like there's such a huge difference now, but it's so easy. It feels like it's so easy, unless you're intentionally going into different areas, to live your life in a silo and not understand or see what's happening in the lives of other people in the same city right across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just calling that out as well. So
I think this is good. Oh, go ahead, JP.
You know what I learned? Yes, you hear about affordability, but there's some people looking at it and say, if the government, I can't rely on the government. I can't rely on these uh, other people, even employment. I have been laid off. No, excuse me. I had been had a company I work for, and they had downsized, and it's not funny because one minute you thinking that you come in and they give you these promises if you work hard, and within months you could probably apply for another position. Next thing you know, like, hey, we got the downsize. The downsize will get rid of people. So what I kudos to those people who look at it and say, who may not do a GoFundMe, but they become very creative. Um, for example, there are people who are putting out contents, living in cars, or taking a school bus and recreating to a little home, because I know that there are so many uh, 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 people who are. Let's go back to influencers. Sometimes those influencers be lying. They just want to make you think that they got this lifestyle, and soon that camera click off, they look at it like, okay, I just want to just make sure that I got these followers, and not telling the truth that they can't really match. They don't match that life. That lifestyle is just a false. Is lies. So I think that this time is that just be very creative, because like even though we may rely on these systems or rely on government, we have to look at it and say, hey, we have to do what we have to do. I just remember back then where, like Michelle, you were saying, like where politicians come into the neighborhood. I remember when they used to come and kiss the babies and take those photo ops, or they might come to the church. I remember just knocking on doors. So I think it definitely have changed, and I'm not sure why it had kind of switched. I mean, not switched, but went to the place where uh, let's just do a great post, and then we get ahead and do a TikTok video, and it becomes so disconnect because people look at it and say, "Do you really care about my problems?" Now, I'm at a situation where I had stayed in my car. And you know what? I made it as if it was an overnight experience. It was discomforting, disheartening, but I realized life is life. Because it happened that way doesn't mean I will be in that situation. So I told my story, but not only telling the story, I look at it and say, okay, what do I just start following other people and listen to people who say, you know what? It happened to me. So I would say this to say is that yes, get to the polls, educate yourself, stick with your values. If you get someone who's in office is not doing their work, say something, do something, but also look at your household and say what works best for me. If I just have to be in a situation where um, I lost my job. Be creative. I'm not saying it's for everyone, but we all got something in us that we don't have to stay in that box where we have to wait on somebody to do things. Because you know what? If when you are pushed, or if you're in a situation where uh, uh, you don't know how it ends with me, or don't know how life will with how you're in a situation where life is just so hard and grueling, you look at it and say, you know what, if I could get up another day, just look at it another day. And that's how I see it. So
No, thank you for that, JP. I think it's really important to name that too, because I think like for us, especially at Women Engage, like our work, of course, is around civic engagement, but that's also where
mhm,
we talk about the community engagement and activations, because it's not about just building the relationships to hold elected officials accountable, but it's also building those bridges and connections within community, because you never know how we can leverage and build power in that structure as well,
mhm,
and like being able to like basically walk and chew gum at the same time, in terms of like we can do both, and we can advocate for those who hold power and also harness the power that we have to make the changes here and also
mhm,
impact other people's lives around us, right? Not necessarily like the pay it forward model, but like more so the aspect of just like being in community with each other. What
mhm,
does it mean to like share in resources, share in conversation, talk about the stories of our experiences just as you lifted up, that can really help continue to motivate people, because you just never know what can be helpful for other folks.
mhm,
And then I think the second point I wanted to talk about was like that point that you raised, Sierra, about like this is sometimes the first time like people don't hear from the candidates, they hear from us. And
mhm,
that's because money. No, like I mean, so and I'm naming that, and I also put our donation down at the bottom too. If anybody wants to donate, $1, $5, anything helps. The reason I'm naming that though is that like as we know, we have a campaign and money problem. So like even when we ask about like why are they not kissing babies anymore and it's just like a social media post, it's money. It's affordability. Because if you're telling me that I can reach thousands of people by putting up a really cool, relatable TikTok dance versus spending the money and the sweat equity to go out and knock doors, I'm gonna do that. Also knowing too, because of the way that our campaigns are structured, candidates are coming out to talk to you about, you know, why you should vote for them, not necessarily about the issues.
mhm,
They're coming out there to talk about why you should understand and believe in their agenda, not necessarily hear directly from you. And that's just because of the money and the financial aspect. Even for folks who, let's say, before they started running, money is sometimes the biggest barrier in terms of being able to help people or even being able to have the skills, the tools, and the resources to do these types of things, which is why Women Engaged does what we do. Because the model that we do is like through integrated voter engagement. So, like, we're also a part of our arm is training organizations and organizers on how to run their types of campaigns and canvases so you can have deep conversations. So, like,
mhm,
outside of election years, because we do this work year round, outside of election years, usually in our downtime, we'll have a deep canvas where we're going door to door or on the phone and having deeper conversations that are sometimes 10, 15, 20 minutes at length, or having these type of things to help inform what the
mhm,
strategies are and lift up lived experiences from people in community, because there's so many barriers because of money. Like, and it takes money to do all these things because folks
mhm,
need to be able to live. You know, like, so even when I think about like the advocating and why we're always like, hey, you guys, tell us what's going on with you, like share your stories. Stories are a catalyst for change. But I also understand too that if you're like a working parent
mhm,
and you got like 2.5 jobs, because that's what on average what people have in Atlanta to make ends meet,
mhm,
it's a privilege to be able to go to the Capitol and share your story with an elected official who may or may not be available. And that's where Women Engage and folks like us come into play, because we're here to help be good stewards of that information and help that process. I'm not saying it's perfect, because there are definitely other systems in the world that operate differently where we divest money from the political process. Unfortunately, that's not our reality right now. And we could definitely talk about how we get there one day. But I'm just naming what we're working with right now. Like, because I think that like it's just super important that we like have those type of conversations, because it's like at first people hear that we're canvassing and they think that like, oh, you're just trying to get out the vote, you're just trying to make sure people vote, and it's like, yes, and I'm also here to help you in whatever way that means. So that means that, like, if you need access to transportation, let me hook you up with the People's Agenda, who's going to organize rides to the polls, especially while gas is high. They are over here doing that type of work. Like, you want to learn more about this? Let me figure out how to break this down, so then that way you can get it and you can talk to people that you know about it. Right? Like, we could all do just a little bit more, and then that'll count for just something. But a lot of times, the biggest barrier for us being activated and doing the things that we need to do is money. And money is the reason why we continue to be more disconnected. Because the more time we spend trying to get money, that's less time that we have in community. Which is why, again, another plug, we have the Justice Jam coming out June 6th at Greenbrier. Like, it's an opportunity. It's free. That's why we do free food, free all this, because we want to make sure we are breaking down these barriers. We have free childcare and also occupational therapists, because we're meeting people at the intersections. Regardless of the fact if you might have a physical or intellectual disability, it doesn't stop us from being able to be in community with each other and knowing that we have that. Because I don't know, I think a lot of times it's like, you know, especially for Black folks, our resiliency is like one of our major selling points. Like, we are resilient. Okay, like, we are resilient all the time. We will persevere and make a way. Like, you know, the Clark Atlanta's like, what is it? Make it like I'll find a way, or I'll make one. Right? That's kind of like that's what we do, and that's beautiful, and it deserves to be celebrated. But that doesn't mean that like we need to continuously be there, because that's a survival space. We deserve to thrive. Right? We deserve to be able to thrive and live in really great holistic lives, which is why, again, this is all coming full circle. We use the values of reproductive justice. Okay, that's why I said, like, it's all connected. And that's all like, because I'm just like, yes, we survive, and that should always be like celebrated, because technically speaking, for the things that Black people face in this country, especially across the intersections, if you're like a woman, queer, working class, whatever, you should be really like, it's like we're an anomaly. It's like, wow, we did this. Like, we're really surviving. We should celebrate that. And we deserve to thrive. We deserve to be in spaces like that, and all of us should be able to do that. And so just try to unpack that a bit, because I'm just like, yes, and like, I don't know, but that's me. I'm just like, I want my people to be free of living in survival spaces. I know I'm working on that myself personally. Shout out to my therapist, but I want that for everyone.
Absolutely. Well, this was good.
I know, right? Sorry, y'all. I was like, drop the mic. No, but so with all of this in mind, right, we're gonna pivot just a little bit, because you talked a little bit about this weekend that y'all had, Sierra, and we have the Justice Jam coming up, and we're gonna probably ask this question. We're gonna ask it here, so if you're tuning in, feel free to drop it in the chat. But what does justice mean to y'all? I would love to hear that. If you have an answer now, that's fine. I just threw that on the spot.
Okay, great, because like I asked the question, but I didn't prepare my answer. Oh man. Oh. I'm gonna let JP go first.
Okay. I think justice look like, what's the question again? What's justice?
What does justice mean to you?
I say that every voice matters. I really believe that. I think that even if you voting matters, definitely your voice matters. If we agree or disagree, I'd rather for you to say, even I don't want no one to suppress the way I feel. Sometimes we feel a certain way based upon our experiences, and we lean towards what someone teaches how to believe, or people tell us we should think this way. But with justice, not to get off the rabbit trail, I think is your voice matters. Being equality, equitable. That's all.
Thank you. Okay. I think justice is, at first I had to look up the actual definition of justice, but for me, justice means righting any wrong that has caused somebody hmm, how do I say this? Righting any wrong that has caused somebody, like that has taken away someone's right to live freely, to make to to have to make sacrifices or have to make this is hard. This is so hard. Oh my gosh. Wait. Okay. Hold up. No. I'm gonna make it simple. Righting any wrong for rights that people are owed. Being able to live freely, walk into any space with confidence, not have to walk into a restaurant and scan the room and see, like, should I be here or am I allowed to be here? And justice to me is also accountability. Someone taking accountability for what it is that they have done to wrong a certain individual, a group of people, in any marginalized group or group that is not marginalized. So that's the biggest word, accountability, and being intentional about righting that wrong. And it does not mean that this, like, justice is not like, for instance, a misdemeanor charge should not be like looked at. Every case should not be looked at the same way. Every person should not be looked at the same way. And taking in someone's environment, and having empathy and understanding on what the outcome is of justice is what justice means to me. I'm going to rewrite that and make it clean. But, yeah.
No, that was great. I loved all y'all answers. And when you said looking up the definition of justice, I was like, let me go over here and do that right now. Because I didn't even think about that. Because it is such a huge topic. And I think,
It
like,
is.
for me, I could probably ramble about it all day. Because, okay, yeah, I majored in political science, but my subfield is like political theory and philosophy and religion. So I love, this is like my little, I love it. It's my little brain. But I love talking about like these little theoretical concepts and like philosophical concepts of how we see things. But I think what you guys said is like really a testament to like one, the broadness of justice, right? Too. And then also to the fact that like it really much is like a very equitable or like fit to how you fit, right? Kind of situation. And I think for me, where I've been challenging myself over like at least the last few years, is that there's enough room for all of it, right? So like justice knowing that it's in fairness, right? And that we can issue and give due to what people deem as fair. And no, that's not necessarily taken away from someone else. Because I think right now, this country's biggest like scam, I use in quotes, is that as if though like if we are fair to one person, that somehow it makes it unfair for another. Like the amount of people who cape for billionaires to keep their money or to be taxed at the lowest rate is insane to me, because it's like, why, just because they have to pay more because we're advocating for them to pay more in taxes doesn't mean that that's unfair to them. We're actually trying to right the fairness thing, because oftentimes billionaires especially make their capital through the usage of public goods and services and through the labor of people. And if that person can hoard, and I'm going to say it's hoarding, you're hoarding billions of dollars in resources and all this type of stuff, then the value of the labor in which the people who are providing that should be valued substantially higher than at least minimum wage. And let alone like, you know, if minimum wage is $7.25, let alone if you're being valued at like what, $15. Like it's like how we value these folks needs to be represented there too, and seeing that as a form of justice. But oftentimes folks don't see that because we're oftentimes committed to this, I guess, what is the word? This misshapen form of what this country deems as just. Because I think sometimes, like I was looking up the Cornell Law School definition of it, and they talk about it being through law and the arbiters of law. But I don't know, being a Black person in America, I'm like, slavery was legal.
Yeah.
It was not just. So like, I don't know. I'm just like, just the law don't mean it's just. And I think that we have it on ourselves that like there are people understanding that like there are people who, as we learn their scope of justice, we can learn better on how to relate to them. Because I'm like, no, like billionaires are using up all these resources. Like even now when I think about the billionaires who benefit from AI data centers and the impact that it has on environments, it's like the value of a human life kind of situation. Because it's like, okay, they get to make money by doing all this stuff, But then the people in that area now who are already not making enough money to make ends meet now have to spend more money on medical care coverage or resources in order to get adequate drinking water and to treat the things that are going on. So it's like, is that just because they have more money, or people thinking that like, I think about other people who think that like it's unjust to forgive student loans just because they have paid their student loans off. And I'm just like, how does this work? Like, what do we mean? Because I mean, the reality is that you're just a victim of an unjust system as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we should perpetuate other people to also continue to be victims of the same unjust system just because we were victims or survivors of an unjust system, right? I don't know. I don't know. But that's also, I really like the question, because it's like when you start hearing where people relate to what is just and then how it applies to stuff, it's like so like telling.
Yeah.
Because I feel like oftentimes a lot of the political conversations really has always been about us debating acts of fairness and equity and trying to right it, because inherently speaking, this country was founded on unjust principles, laws, and stuff like that. So, like, so what is it? So pivoting again, because I think we're in the last 30 minutes of the show. And so shout out to everybody who's still hanging out with us. I know people are coming in and out the chats. We appreciate you all. If you haven't seen already, there's a QR code floating around on the left side of your screen. Wait, sorry, I'm mirrored. So I was like on the left side of your screen up here. If you want to join us for our Justice Jam June 6th at Greenbrier Mall from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Again, it's free, open to the public, family friendly. We're going to have a really great time. But talking about fairness and all the things that are going on, and this is something that I raised up a little bit earlier before we got on the thing, is these conversations about the privatization of TSA. And I don't know if folks have heard, at least here in Atlanta, the city council recently passed a bill to conduct a study on what it would mean to privatize TSA for the Atlanta airport. This is also underscoring the fact that federally speaking, they're already working with contractors out of cities like Kansas City and others to provide private aid to folks, to airports in those areas, while also using AI to support efforts in like airport security. Did y'all hear about that?
All I saw was that the city council approved to do I'm going to call it a study, but it's not a study. That's all I knew. And I was like, I'm not ready to read into this yet. So I still got a lot of
What?
I'm trying to like conceptualize what would the privatization of TSA look like and mean. And so that's all I have right now. There's a lot of questions.
I do too. And it's like one of these things that like, for me personally, I feel like we've kind of been heading there. And I've been feeling some type of way about it since. And now I'm just kind of like, dang, this is kind of how they get you. Cause like, okay, hear me out. Like, as y'all know, I love a good, let me provide some context before I get to the point. Hear me out. So 9/11 happened. TSA was born as a measure to like increase security. Over time, we had all these hangups at the airport. And so instead, they were like, how about y'all just pay us some money and we'll expedite you through the line. Somehow that was going to make you more safe. Even though, like, granted, like the process for that is like you give your number to the FBI essentially, and they have you in the system, which if you're they already know who you are. They already have a system. So like, okay, but you pay your money and you have to do less security checks. And then there we go. And then here comes Clear, which is a private entity that works along with TSA that people could sign up for to do the same thing. So then airports also create a line for expedited security for people who are priority boarding and or first class. So we already started like moving in that direction a little bit over the years. We started incorporating like AI facial recognition with like faceless ID, stuff like that. And so now that we're here, it's like, at first I was like, dang, how did we get here? But now I'm like, oh, this is how we got here, because I very, very recently, like in the last 2 years, signed up for TSA PreCheck. And I think it was included in my credit card. I was traveling a lot, and I also have accessibility needs that I was like, sign me up.
Mhm.
But it always felt very weird to me, like it just in my core, because it was just like, what am I doing here? Like, why do I get the privilege of doing this just because I have a credit card when there's other people who also could probably use the same accessibility? Like, why are we? Because I think about this through the lens of disability justice, the disability tax. If you have a disability, you have to pay more for the same for more accessibility or accommodations.
Mm.
And that's how we're looking at it. Because I'm like, the reality is that like, why are we normalizing people standing in lines for over even 30 minutes, but let alone an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours? And that's just the thing, to the point that it's like, oh, come to the airport 2 hours early. Like as if though, like, because again, this is all about time, investment, resources, things like that.
Yeah.
So now when we're thinking about like a privatization of it in a space where airports are already raising the costs on airfare, and they're not going to come back down. They're justifying and saying, oh, jet fuel costs, whatever. They're not going to come back down. And then you're going to have an entire private entity that's going to take away jobs from government officials.
Mhm.
And that's going to be a different type of benefit plan, stuff like that, if those people want to transfer over or can't even transfer over. And so I don't know. It very much disrupts a lot of like the justification for why TSA was there in the first place, in my opinion. And then I also think too that like it's about the liability. If that the whole purpose was supposed to be about security, and you have a private security thing that's supposed to maintain the national security of something, what does that mean in terms of like the next step, which is the privatization of like police or military?
Mm.
Whoa, that's huge. You said something that I didn't know, and I'm a Gen Z. I've never known an airport without TSA. So I was, what like even that was foreign to me. So thinking about, so now I'm interested. I like to use the past to see how we can move forward. Granted, like 9/11 happened, the Patriot Act happened. A lot of people were very concerned about the security and safety of the nation. Was there a resistance to having TSA come into airports in the first place? No.
I mean, JP could probably speak a little bit better to this to me, but from my experience, not really, because they use a lot of the propaganda from 9/11 to scare people into TSA.
Okay.
So you think about like, so I'm speaking about 9/11 from the perspective that I was a child, and we make jokes about this all the time because millennials have dark humor. But you just have to imagine that there's a world disaster like 9/11 where it's still actively happening. People are like jumping from the building, and your teacher. Now, this isn't like, oh, there's a TV on. They have to go get the TV cart.
Yeah.
They said, look, little children. Like I'm in the 5th grade.
Yeah.
Look at what's happening.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, okay. And so then they were using all of this propaganda to scare people. And of course, people were inconvenienced. Like, why do I have to take off my shoes? This, that, and the other. But it was like, well, if you want to stay safe, this is what we got to do, because we're about to go to war because they did this, and this. And it was like, everyone was like, oh no, like, like it was like a very, and don't get me wrong, 9/11 is a very tragic event. Like I'm not negating from that either, but it's just to say that like the propaganda machine very much fueled it at the time to justify it and very much normalize what that looks like. But JP, because JP, you have much more experience in this level of things. And so, yes, go ahead.
The funny thing about, I used to work for security before it was, there was an airline called Piedmont. And I was a security, I worked security at the airport where people used to come through. And the biggest thing is just make sure they had no explosive. So this is, we did have canine dogs, of course, but this is back in Newark Airport. And we was definitely want to make sure there was like the pipe bombs and make sure that we pat people down. It definitely have changed when TSA had taken over, because it was more private companies that was securing us during that time. And so I also worked with Clear. So Clear was one of the organizations I worked for, and they got rid of it. I was in Atlanta Airport. And at first, when they presented Clear, I thought was a great idea, getting through security fast. But just going back to TSA, airline travel was so different because it was more luxury during that time. So when people come through the airport, you was either is you have a prestige there. You know, you flying. It's like uh, uh, this if you have money, you on airlines. If you don't have the money, you on Greyhound. So it's a big distinction there when you travel. So if so when TSA came in was when TSA was now the security, then they went ahead and did Clear, and I thought Clear was pretty good with because those passengers who travel more frequently they could get through. But this is the thing that I didn't like about Clear. Clear, you had to pay a service fee, but they need your biometrics. And that was scary because they want to take your eyes, your fingerprints. They want to make sure you have a passport, your birth certificate. That was just too much information to have just to go through security. I mean, not through security, but it was just too much where you have government just taking all your information. Because when you sign up for Clear, first thing you have to do, we had to do a deep background check. We had to do a 10-year background check. After you pass that, then we have to take your biometrics. That's your eyes and your fingerprints. They want to know your height. They want to know who else is traveling with you. And so you don't have to take off your shoes. So when we was at Clear, it's how they market it. It was great for those people who travel a lot. However, it was a lot of glitches, and people who didn't have the Clear pass, they looked at it and said, "Okay." It was more like a separation of the haves and the haves not, the leaders who, the people who fly first class and those people who sit in coach. But the people who was going through Clear, who had the Clear passes, they realized that I'm paying all this money, but the service is not the big difference. Only thing it just get me closer to the checkpoint. But when you get to the security line, like get to security, you fall in line with the rest of the people who don't have the access to it. So what happened, they have all your information stored, but it wasn't, you still have to take off your shoes. You still have to your bags still have to go through if something with your bags, open up your laptop, you still go through that process. It just pretty much, it was a lot of kinks there. So definitely was I don't know how they're going to do it now, which like you was mentioning how they got how you say, Michelle, what was it again? The
Privatize.
private. I don't know. I don't know. I just think that we were just giving up information just a little bit too freely. They got too much of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about what you said something about like the haves or have nots, and I'm thinking about what tiers and what levels of affordability are they going to add on to the airport experience? Are you gonna, if it's privatized, obviously the main point of privatization is profit. Is the main point of security at the airport will no longer be I guess national security. You're gonna have to pay. They make subscriptions for everything. That's how I see in my mind. You're gonna have to pay $100 to get through this line, or $10 to be able to get through this line. There's not gonna be. I imagine that there won't be a free option. Again, just a place for more exploitive theft from people who are already spending $400, $500, $600 to get to where they're going. And then also what you were saying about the TSA workers, Michelle, using moments in history such as TSA workers not being paid for months because the government could not come to a consensus on funding. It sounds good to somebody who's been depending on the government or waiting on a check for months to be like, well, privatization sounds great because at least I know I'm going to get paid here. I'm just thinking about all the different like nuances that come with privatization and how public opinion be able to have a say in what happens specifically.
Yeah. And I think to that point too, it makes me think about like, what does that mean for communities going forward? So over the years, like to the point that JP made, like back in the day, flying was not like a very normal thing. It was very much like you really making it if you was flying places all the time. So we've made, flying has become much more accessible much more amenable to the point that, like, especially like I think about this in the context of just the country, but also the world, where most of us more operate in like a global experience or at least a transient one. So most of us are like moving in a way that like is a way. Like I know for myself, like I moved from home when I was 18. And granted, like I started flying more a little bit in undergrad, but like definitely now. And it's like, what does this mean for people who have moved away from spaces and depend on air travel and then now have an additional barrier in terms of being able to go home for like health issues, things of that nature? Like there's a lot of different impacts and aspects about this, especially now as we see like in the wake of the closure of Spirit Airlines, right?
Yeah.
And I say, and I'm linking all this together a little bit because it's like, oh my gosh, right? Like what is happening here? And so, no, I appreciate this conversation. I just think it's something important to have as the conversations are going on with TSA and privatization. But I want to uplift a couple of comments that we just got out of Instagram. So shout out to the Artsy International. I'm going to put your stuff here on the screen so everybody can see it. Once my thing loads. Oh gosh, there we go. Okay. So this is the first part of what they said. Super late on this. But justice to them, it's not just putting ice on the wound, knowing that most of the times it will require more to fix slash aid and assist the wound. And it made me think about like our conversations around reparations. They also added two, like there's more. Sorry, you guys. Like they added 3 comments back to back at Instagram. So I'm just uplifting them for people who are listening audibly as well. They also said also the root being just. Most times when just is used is downplayed in conversation. For example, my head hurts and my head just hurts comes across differently. That root to me means a lot. They also said saying just is a bare minimum or an underhand. Even saying we need justice is less than what is actually needed.
Wow.
And I really appreciate that perspective. I think that last part especially is why, in particular for us, we at Women Engage are under the flagship of reproductive justice and like the nuances that it brings and the intersections of that work. And so I just wanted to lift that up as well in terms of what they were saying. But thank you for commenting that. And I guess like see what you guys are thinking too, based off of what they've shared.
Saying breaking the prefix of just and saying how we have used just to minimize something or like the severity of something was like, oh, that's like very eye-opening, because when we use the word justice, not us, not we, not Women Engaged, but in language and conversation, what does it mean to minimize the importance of like whatever it is that we're facing for us, specifically I'll say for Black communities, or maybe I'll say for myself as a Black woman in America. So often the things that we need, the things that we want, the dreams that we have are minimized down to what we can do for other people, how we can work for somebody else. And we have so often had to minimalize or make smaller ourselves to make everybody else comfortable. Thank you for sharing that perspective. And it just makes me like, Also, it just makes me think about the fact that like outside of our communities, people don't really like the word justice unless it's like law and order. And that's a completely different vernacular. That's a completely different connotation to the word of justice as well. And so they say they want justice, but all they really want is punishment. And we want justice and we want choices and freedoms still. So that's what yeah.
Oh, I love that, Sierra. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's like you say, it could mean so many different, the word could means differently to someone else. I mean, to many different people. Like when you hear just people do want punishment, yeah.
And I think like to the point too around like there's just so many different forms of justice, and I think that's why again it's so telling, because to your points here, like there's punitive justice, the eye for eye, like through corporal punishment type of aspects of things. There's other philosophies like restorative justice. I talked a little bit about disability justice. There's of course social justice, which has its own umbrella. I remember many years ago, I'm trying to think about it. I worked for a social justice institute, and we had like a document that listed like 30 different forms of justice,
Yeah.
like that people have used or attributed themselves to. And so I think that idea of like, again, that last point around like just is the bare minimum, and even saying we need justice is less than what's actually needed. And that's why I was like, it's such like deep and profound work. And so I just want to say thank you, Artsy International, for contributing your thoughts to the conversation, because it's so important, I think, again, from a linguistic standpoint, because I think that's what you're kind of getting into. It's like even us as individuals, as Black women, but also like the linguistics, like language is important. And how we say things is important. And even if we don't see it as that deep, subconsciously we can, right? In terms of what it looks like, or that like there's always more to be uncovered. And so that's why it's important to like, remain open, stay curious. And that's why, you ask and we answers. No, but sorry. But I know we're in like the last stretch of the time, and this has been a very deep and robust show, you guys. So shout out to y'all and everyone who's come in and all the things. This has been really exciting, but it's time for us to start landing the plane. And so, usually in the show we try to end with like, what are we doing to like take care of ourselves? And I kind of want to extend that in terms of like, what is something that we're doing to like pour back into our cups, right? Something that's inspiring us in this moment, or something that's giving us a little bit of reprieve in the midst of all of this and all the things we talked about and all the things that we talk about. Okay.
I could go. Last week we after our election, during our election bliss, during the wind down. Something I love is that we came together. We talked about what was happening on the doors, but we just laughed and talk about. We had stories about from our childhood to um, uh, family, and we broke bread. But I think what it was importantly is that even though we had different backgrounds, we heard different stories, some stories that we would never forget, some stories we want to forget. But there was a place now you be around people, you feel safe. It wasn't titles, it wasn't gender, it wasn't about who was older, who was smart. It was laughter in the room. We laughed and we played games, and we learned one of the games. I can't think of the name of it, but who tell the truth or who's lying. But even just something as a game could just we could all open up thinking we know somebody we don't know. That's a good way to get to know each other. So that's community right there. We don't always have the answer, but even if we don't have the answer, we could always uh, find somebody you can lean on. Somebody could be that stranger, and that you can still the outcome of it is like, oh yeah, they are really good people. I like this here. So I think for me is that this work is hard work, but it's good work. If you're surrounded by good people and people who really care for what you do and care about your well-being, yeah, I think my takeaway was this. I can look around and say, uh, we did good. Community is here. We are community.
Yes. Thank you. And the question specifically, like, what are you doing to pour back into yourself?
Yeah, like to pour back yourself, maintain as we navigate all the things.
Oh man. It's been hard. I can't even say I've been doing things intentionally right now to rise above all the things that we're dealing with. I'll say unhealthily, it's been disassociation. Like when I'm done, like I feel like because this is the work that I do, when I'm done, I want to be done, because so much of me is used to working with this, being in the movement, and then going home, you have to read up about what's happening, right? Yeah. So for me, it's been, if I see a headline, I'm not going to click it and read it right now. Like I am going to wait until I'm ready to process, of course, being timely enough to be able to analyze and do the work. But for me, it's been, I see an article, I'm not touching it right now. I don't want to dive in. But personally, like also leaning into community, whether that's just being with one friend when I can, or reading a book. Now, for me, that means changing the genre of books that I'm reading. because I still read books that are going to remind me mostly of what's happening or how we got here in the first place. So trying to lean into like Kennedy Ryan, and it has been really fun. It's still like I've been reading historical fictions, and like that's me and my mom's. Like for instance, I read Harlem Rhapsody, which is a book about a woman who was very influential in Harlem Renaissance when it comes to
Mhm.
bring more artists and um, yeah. So trying to read things that don't remind me of what's happening right now, not doing
Mhm.
clickbait, um, just not as much on social media, and then also as a musician, just trying to have fun in my playing and not like um, unlearning or undoing the fact that like I'm playing music to make money and just getting back to the root of the love for music that I had as a kid,
Mm.
and just playing because I love to do it and I loved exploring sound and um,
Mhm.
creating community from that. So for me, that's what I've been doing. So.
I
Mhm.
love this. Oh my gosh. Oh, my heart is so full. Oh my
Oh,
goodness. I think same for me. Like definitely been really leaning into community lately. So shout out to the homies, really holding it down. I think, I even think like sometimes, dissociation is not always a bad thing. Sometimes you need
Mhm.
it because James Baldwin said it yourself, to be woke in this state, you be enraged all the time. I'm paraphrasing and butchered the heck out that
yes.
quote.
I got you. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I hope y'all could begin with putting down. As you guys know, I'm a nerd, game enthusiast all around, and so gaming has definitely been there for me. I think lately, I've kind of been getting back into my streaming bag, and so lately, the game that I'm streaming now is uh, South by Midnight. It's a
Mhm.
beautiful story. The main character is a black woman, or it's like black young lady, I should say, because she's like 18 in the deep South, and it has a lot of folklore, a lot of stuff about her being a weaver, dealing with haints, and like trying to cure the land of like stigma. It's a whole thing. It's magical. It's beautiful. I was having a lot of fun with it over this weekend, and so that's something that I'm definitely getting to doing. It's just like really pouring back into myself, like very basic stuff like am I hydrated, maintaining my space, like resetting those things. So like all those things have been kind of incorporating that into me. And so I just want to thank y'all for being here with me for another installment of You Ask Me Answers. And shout out to everybody who's also tuning in as well. We should be back next month. I'm actually pulling up this date right now. June 29th. We'll be
Mhm.
back June 29th. So for everyone who's tuning in, make sure if you don't remember already, runoff elections coming up. We got some mobilization we got to do at the Capitol. We got an event coming up June 6th. If you want to learn more about that, and we can talk about all those things. Again, it's free for everyone, free for the public. But we just thank you all again for tuning in with us. Again, we love to get your feedback. If you have any thoughts or comments or things that you want us to talk about on the show, our DMs are always open. You can contact us on the website. You can contact us wherever you can. We want to hear from you and be able to continue to this dialogue. And if you want people to also join us here in this little round table, we can also do that too. But until then, we're going to sign off, head on to our next thing because there's a lot of work to be done, as we just talked about. But thank you all so much, and thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.